Even if the fuel rods have been damaged, the most important thing to do with spent fuel rods is to remove the heat, is to cool them down. Even if the spent fuel rods have been damaged, pouring water over them to help cool them down is very effective. In addition to injecting water, TEPCO is attempting to restore its high voltage power. What does that mean? Restoring high voltage power, according to information from TEPCO, has to do with connecting an external power source to their power supply system. If they can get their high voltage power back up, they can use various power sources to execute a variety of measures. What kind of power sources will they need? What kind of devices will they be able to use then? For the spent fuel rod pool, there's actually a pump that is needed to recycle the water, to circulate the water. By circulating the water, it will be possible to cool down the spent fuel rod pool and the core. There are many systems that are involved in cooling down the heat. Once the various pumps can get going, they will be able to function steadily and over the long run to cool down the core. However, one thing to note is that just because the power is restored, that does not mean that the coolant system will be back up. The pumps need to be properly connected to the power supply in order for the pumps to move. That part also needs to be taken in account. Well, Mr. Mizuno, this morning, the helicopter dumped water over the reactor 4 times this morning. They are planning to hose water from the police and SDF water hose cars. What other measures are being considered? Well, there is no promising development yet. I think that our only hope at the moment is the water tank or water cannon tanks that the SDF and police have. They expect that this measure will at least supply some amount of water into the pool. In addition to reactors 3 and 4, reactors 5 and 6 are showing an increase in the temperature at their spent fuel rod pools. The temperature is rising by about 5 degrees a day. Right now, the temperature is at around 60 degrees. In about 1 more week, the water temperature will reach 80 degrees and the water will begin to evaporate. The power company is closely monitoring the water level at reactors 5 and 6. They are looking at possibly injecting water into these reactors as well. We had Professor Yamaguchi from Osaka University and NHK's correspondent Noriyuki Mizuno with us.
The team conducting today's operation were putting themselves at risk of radiation exposure, but there was an urgent need to prevent a further leak of radioactive materials. At about 7:30 this morning, a column of white smoke was billowing from the number 3 reactor. This satellite photo was taken on Tuesday. The building that houses the number 3 reactor was severely damaged by an explosion, making it impossible to keep cooling its spent fuel. Later this morning, Self-Defense Force fire engines and police vehicles were lined up on a highway near the power plant. A spokesman for the Nuclear Safety and Industry Agency says water will be dumped from the air and sent from high-pressure water cannons on the ground. Around the same time, residents of areas near the power plant arrived at a shelter in Saitama City. This person says the earthquakes will eventually end, but exposure to radiation is just the beginning of a struggle. At 9:48, Water was dropped from a self-defense force helicopter. The operation was carried out by CH-47 helicopters of the Ground Self-Defense Force. The choppers have a lead floor to block nuclear radiation. The crew wore special protective gear and the radiation level was closely monitored. Chief of Staff of the Ground Self-Defense Force, Yoshifumi Hibako, says the crew underwent screening procedures and he heard that there was nothing unusual. He says he recognizes the current situation as a national crisis and the forces must respond to the expectation of the Japanese.